You know, in our huge, interconnected world of global trade, there's this incredible story playing out that most of us just never get to see. It's a story about strategy, about ambition, and about a quiet rise to power that has literally reshaped the arteries of commerce. And it all starts with one pretty provocative question. So yeah, this all kind of burst into the open recently with a really dramatic proposal from the United States. And it threatens a confrontation that could snarl supply chains all over the world. So you have to ask, what in the world is going on out there on the high seas that would provoke such an aggressive move? Well, the answer starts with a number, a huge number that really shows you the high stakes of this new confrontation. $1.5 million. That's the potential fee the U.S. wants to slap on a single port call by a single ship just for being built in China. Look, this isn't just another tariff. This is a financial shot across the bow. And to really get why, we need to rewind a bit and see how we got here. The story doesn't actually start today. It really kicks off way back during the last major global crisis. That crisis created a perfect storm and, well, a perfect opportunity. So when the 2008 financial crisis hit, demand for shipping just fell off a cliff. Now, for generations, European banks had been the bedrock of financing for this industry, but they got spooked and they pulled way back, leaving this massive vacuum. And guess who stepped right into that void? Yep, China, ready to finance the world's entire fleet. But here's the thing, this wasn't just some simple business move. Oh no, this was the beginning of a very deliberate, multi-layered strategy to dominate the entire maritime supply chain, and it was executed with just incredible precision and scale. Now, what's so fascinating here is how this visualizes what experts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies call an ocean of state support. I love that phrase, because this wasn't a trickle of money. It was an absolute flood of capital, all pointed at one single goal. And just look at these numbers. Between 2010 and 2018 alone, we're talking about at least $132 billion in state support. But here's the really crucial part. This wasn't just about simple cash handouts. Over 96% of that support came as financing from state-owned banks and leasing companies. I mean, this is a much more sophisticated playbook. And the state got really clever with its policies to hit multiple goals at once. So take the scrap and build program. The government basically paid companies to get rid of their old, aging ships and build new ones. But there was a catch, a really important one. Those new ships had to be built in Chinese shipyards. And this just shows the effect perfectly. I mean, look at this chart. You can see the average age of Chinese-owned ships just dropping like a rock, especially after 2014 when they really doubled down on the policy. So in one brilliant move, China modernized its fleet, propped up its own shipbuilding industry, and made its shipping lines way more competitive. This strategic push completely turned the financial world upside down, too. I mean, this graphic says it all, right? In 2008, the top shipping financiers were all European banks. But just 10 years later, China's Exim Bank and the Bank of China are sitting at number 1 and number 4. It was a complete changing of the guard. And just to put the sheer scale of this financial muscle into perspective, just look at this comparison. Between 2010 and 2018, the total portfolio of Chinese shipping loans and leasing just skyrocketed. Meanwhile, U.S. financing was just a tiny fraction of that. The difference is absolutely staggering. So what was the result of this whole decade-long strategic push? Well, it led to a level of dominance across the entire maritime sector that is, honestly, it's hard to overstate. Let's just run through this because it's wild. They've achieved dominance over every single link in the maritime supply chain, from the ships themselves, where China builds over a third of the world's vessels, to the actual containers they carry, where China produces a mind-boggling 96% of them. They also make over 80% of those giant cranes that load and unload the ships, and their companies operate 7 of the 10 busiest ports on the entire planet. This is total control, from the factory floor all the way to the final port. Now, when you have that level of commercial control, it inevitably starts to have deeper, more strategic implications. You know, as the famous U.S. naval strategist Alfred Thayer Mahan said over a century ago, sea power for commerce and sea power for military strategy, they're really just two sides of the same coin. And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. China's largest shipping company, the state-owned giant COSCO Shipping, is widely seen as the logistical backbone for the People's Liberation Army. These commercial ships serve a dual purpose, and that really blurs the lines between trade and national security. And it's so important to understand that this strategy, using economic tools to achieve bigger geopolitical goals, it isn't unique to shipping. It's actually part of a much larger global playbook. A great example is China's zero tariff policy for Africa. The public promise, the story you hear, is all about boosting African development. But the underlying strategy, according to analysis, is about something else entirely. It's about creating a structured system to secure a long-term, stable supply of strategic resources, everything from minerals to food back to China. You see the pattern? Economic partnership with very clear strategic goals. Which brings us right back to where we started. So with this full picture, this strategic rise funded by massive state support, leading to commercial dominance that has real military implications, suddenly that aggressive U.S. proposal, it starts to look less like a random trade dispute and a lot more like a direct response. The U.S. plan is basically a point-by-point counterattack. It targets the Chinese state-owned operators, like Costco. It targets ships built in China, no matter who owns them. It even penalizes companies that just have new ships on order from Chinese yards. It's a really comprehensive attempt to financially unwind China's grip on the entire maritime sector. So we're left with this enormous question. For decades, right, we were all told that global trade was going to bring us all closer together. But what happens when the very ships, the ports, and the cranes that make all of that trade possible become the pieces on a geopolitical chessboard? The future of how we make and move, well, everything, it's being redrawn right now, out on the world's oceans.